Okay, welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're gearing up to tackle that massive 30-question grammar and vocabulary worksheet, you are exactly where you need to be. Think of the next few minutes as your ultimate cheat code. We're going to bust the absolute most frustrating, common language traps that trip up even the most dedicated learners. By the time we wrap this up, you'll have the exact tools you need to approach your assignment and your real-world conversations with total confidence.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our roadmap today covers 5 key areas: mastering the past tense, perfecting your prepositions, sorting out say, tell, talk, and speak, nailing word forms and collocations, and finally, some real-life vocabulary.
So, starting us off with Section 1, Mastering the Past Tense, specifically finished actions and obligations.
Getting finished actions right is basically the absolute foundation of sounding natural in English. Let's look at this classic trap right here. Yesterday, I forget my keys. Oof, you can almost hear the gears grinding on that one, right? It feels off because, well, we literally can't use a present tense form for something that is completely in the rearview mirror. So the natural, perfect fix is simply, yesterday I forgot my keys.
Now with regular verbs, we've got the total luxury of just tacking on an ed. You text, you texted. You wait, you waited. Simple, right? But English, gotta love it, it absolutely loves throwing curveballs with irregular verbs. Things like come, turning into came, or buy becoming bought. There's really no secret trick or magic formula here. You just gotta commit the verbs on this list to muscle memory, because these heavy hitters are gonna show up constantly in your daily conversations.
So, how does this actually look in the wild? Well, we don't just speak in isolated robotic sentences, do we? We build stories. And to do that smoothly, we just link our past actions in a logical order, like this. First, I checked the time, then I left the house, and finally, I caught the bus. See how that flows? Using those linking words creates a really nice logical timeline.
All right, let's switch gears a bit to past obligations because, man, this is where a lot of people stumble. The absolutely crucial point to remember here is that the word must actually has no past form. No past form at all, so you can't say, we must organize it last week. Instead, you got to swap must out for had to. And here's the second part of that trap. Once you use had to, the verb right after it stays in its base form. Never, ever use a double past like we had to organize it. Just simplify the whole shebang to we had to organize it last week.
Moving right along to Section 2, perfecting your prepositions, specifically place and dependent pairs.
Prepositions, I know, they can completely feel like they have a mind of their own, but they actually follow some pretty strict rules once you see the matrix. Let's test this with a standard Friday night scenario. Imagine you're meeting up with a friend. Would you say there are a lot of people on the bar or in the bar? It's literally just a one-letter difference in spelling, but trust me, it is a massive difference in meaning.
Okay, let's break down the actual rules to answer that. In basically means inside a closed space or area. So, in the bar means physically inside the building itself. At, on the other hand, refers to a specific point, a place or an event, like at the bus stop or at a party. You could absolutely say you're at the bar, meaning the general location. But on is strictly for surfaces. If there are people on the bar, they are literally up there dancing on the counter. So yeah, unless it's a truly wild night out, you definitely want to go with in the bar.
Now those are prepositions of place. Pretty logical, right? But then we run into dependent prepositions. And honestly, this is where logic just completely goes out the window. Look at this. It is hard to adapt for a new culture. It sounds so close, but it's a trap. It has to be. It is hard to adapt to a new culture. There's no real why to figure out here. These are just unbreakable pairs. The verb essentially demands its specific partner.
Looking at some of these super common unbreakable pairs on this cheat sheet, you'll start to notice some patterns. You adapt to, you depend on, you apply for. But here's a really fascinating nuance with the verb agree. Check this out. You agree on a plan or a decision, right? But you agree with a person. So if your coworker suggests a new work schedule, you agree with your coworker on the new schedule. Nailing those tiny distinctions is an absolute game changer for sounding fluent.
Okay, that brings us to Section 3, say, tell, talk, and speak, the communication verbs.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these 4 little verbs manage to confuse almost everyone. And that's because they aren't just interchangeable synonyms. There are strict boundaries here. Say is just for the words themselves, like she said yes. But tell is a whole different beast because it always requires a target, a person actually receiving the info. You tell someone something, like tell me the time. Then you've got talk,
which is for the actual back-and-forth conversation. And finally, speak, which steps in for more formal situations or when you're talking about languages. Let's instantly put that rule into action. Because say is just focusing on the words themselves, and tell is focused on giving information directly to a person, you can totally see why "can you say me the answer" is a guaranteed mistake trap. Me is a person receiving the info, right? So the only correct choice here is, can you tell me the answer? While we're on the topic of communication verbs, I've got a surprising fact for you. One that honestly catches out even super advanced learners. The word discuss already has the built-in meaning of talk about. It's baked right in. So saying we discussed about the budget is a really, really common redundancy. It's like you're saying, we talked about the budget. Sounds silly, right? To fix it, you either just drop the about entirely and say, we discussed the budget, or you swap the verb out and say, we talked about the budget.
All right, rolling right into Section 4, word forms and collocations, the fixed partners.
You know, learning a word is really only half the battle. Actually knowing its correct form is the other half. It is incredibly easy to accidentally throw in a noun when a verb is what's really required, and it just throws off the entire rhythm of the sentence. Just look at this one. We need to organization the event. Now, organization is a noun, it's a thing, but need to absolutely requires an action, a verb. So it's got to be, we need to organize the event. You always want to double-check that the literal shape of the word matches the job it's trying to do in your sentence.
And then we have collocations. These are essentially fixed word partners. In English, these specific words like to hold hands, and you just can't force them to hold hands with anyone else. For example, in English, you make a decision. You definitely don't do a decision, and you don't take a decision, even though I know that might be exactly how it translates from your native language. Same thing with a plan. A plan works. You wouldn't say the plan is work. And a strategy succeeds. We use the verb there, rather than saying it is success. The trick is to learn these as complete chunky phrases, not just single words. Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Real-Life Vocabulary, covering events, work, and tech. Let's apply all this to scenarios you actually encounter out there in the real world. Say you're attending a wedding. You definitely need to know that the woman getting married is the bride and the man is the groom. The official, actual event itself, that's the ceremony. And hey, if the groomsmen are all dressed identically, they're wearing matching suits. Having these really essential, everyday terms locked and loaded just means you can socialize and chat about the event without any of that awkward hesitation. Of course, when the weekend wraps up, we're all back to work. And you're going to hear this idiom constantly, a 9-to-5 job. This simply refers to a standard, normal job with regular office hours, usually Monday through Friday. It's used as a contrast to other types of gigs you might talk about, like, say, being a driving instructor at a driving school, which obviously does not follow your typical desk job schedule.
And finally, we got to talk about technology. Because let's face it, things inevitably go wrong. So if your app or your computer suddenly fails, it crashes. But if your car engine fails on the highway, it doesn't crash. Well, hopefully not, unless you actually hit something. No, your car breaks down. Breakdown is specifically for machines and engines. Now, if you're in the moment and you completely blank on both of those specific terms, your safe, reliable backup phrase for absolutely anything is simply stopped working. My phone stopped working. My car stopped working. It's general, it's super safe, and it's basically always correct. And just like that, we've walked through the 5 key areas of your study notes. You now know exactly how to lock in those past tenses, how to pair up your tricky prepositions, the strict rules for those communication verbs, the importance of collocations, and some really essential daily vocabulary. So, are you ready to conquer that 30-question worksheet? Absolutely. If you get stuck, literally just refer back to these slides. But more importantly, remember that language isn't just about passing a test, it's about actually connecting with the world around you. Now that you've unlocked all these cheat codes, whose mind are you going to change in your next conversation? Dive in, trust your preparation, and I'll see you in the next explainer.